Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is DafubFilm&TV, and rather belatedly, I've just watched the second episode of Secret Wars, or should I say, Marvel's Secret Wars. So I thought I would give you my quick thoughts on it, which I'm sure you're terribly, terribly interested in having. First and foremost, they seem to have spent more money this episode. There was more special effects. You see a lot more people turning into Skrulls. A lot more people, well, again, just turning in now to Skrulls, shape-shifting from on screen, from one fake identity to another, to another, to another. So they're obviously, spending a bit more money. Although, again, I like the location shooting. It's not on sets. That inevitably, helps improve the perception of production quality. If whether it's well, again, if this is all in the volume, it'd be a completely different kettle of fish. It would look cheap, but or at least I think it would probably look cheap. But again, it's location shooting. Looks good to me, and so in that regard, that is an improvement. But it's not. Again, I said in the previous episode, my review of the previous episode, I've never been a particular big aficionado of comics / graphic novels. I have a few graphic novels, but it was never really my thing. And certainly, I was probably the most of the Marvel IP. I was probably most aware of the X-Men, both because of the cartoon show and then because of the movies. And then, of course, since the MCU debuted, Iron Man and all the rest, it was never really an area of kind of interest / expertise for me. So the fact that this is clearly not a redo of the original Secret Invasion storyline, the comic books, which to my mind, from what I know of it, sounds like something that you'd reserve for the movies and you could probably string out for like 10 years. Based on what I know of it. And it probably would have been a very good direction for the MCU to go in rather than the one they so far have with this phase, which has been a mess, to put it mildly. Again, this is based on the reviews in the box office, because apart from I think one was not WandaVision. Well, the WandaVision TV show is one of the best Marvel shows we've seen so far. But in terms of the movies, the most recent Doctor Strange one, which has Wanda in it, which I think came out, was this earlier this year? I think it was earlier this year. Oh, how the time flies. I've seen that, and it was okay. But I haven't really bothered to see pretty much anything else, because the combination of kind of lukewarm reviews and kind of consumer response. This is, it seems to be, irrespective of the quality of the show itself or lack thereof, it seems to me to be a rather big waste of what could have been a major kind of story event that could have gone on, as I said, for a decade. They could have strung it out over 10 years. Who's a Skrull? Who's not a Skrull? What are they up to? And so on. Instead, what we're actually getting is kind of this storyline where they appear to basically present the Skrulls, this is, again, spoiler warning, as a bunch of kind of innocent refugees who were horribly, victimized by a nasty empire, yada, yada, yada. But it now turns out that they were lying, and that, in fact, they probably started the war with that other empire whose name escapes me to begin with. And so they've been lying the whole time. They've also been lying about their numbers. There's actually around 1 million of them on Earth, which is obviously enough to do some very, very serious damage. And a particularly extreme individual who is effectively presented to the show presented to the audience at the very beginning of the episode, as a kind of young Skrull refugee, to me comes across as someone who, again, his parents died during the war, who comes across as being effectively a chip off the old block. In other words, a warmonger who basically hasn't really learned any lessons from what happened to the Skrulls last time they went on the power and domination pathway, shall we say, or course of action. And so we have a situation where they're basically just trying to take over the planet. It's kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers almost. Who's under control by the alien enemy, who isn't, and so on and so forth. And we had again, it's the one part where, again, I've seen criticism of this online. I'd have to agree with it, where the budget limitations come across is that the kind of terrorist attack, as it's portrayed in the previous episode and parts of this episode, that they're faking, as carried out by kind of MAGA extremists for all intents and purposes, which is way too on the nose if you ask me, but and hyperbolic in the extreme. But the terror attack seems rather kind of cheap and low scale, considering the number of people it's supposed to have killed. And so this is, it's, again, if I were a fan of the comic books, if I were a big fan of the Secret Invasion storyline, I might be quite disappointed and or becoming maybe even somewhat irked by the fact that they've decided to waste what was a big storyline from the comics and something as relatively, compared to the movies, as quote unquote low budget as this, and the fact that the kind of terror attack is a relatively low budget, not very impressive affair. I mean, we know the streaming services are capable of pulling off some very serious production values when they want to. We know, because Netflix does this all the time. The problem with Netflix, as I see it, is that they never stay the course. I don't think there's been a single show on Netflix that I've been interested in that they haven't, cancelled at only a season or 2 or 3 seasons in. I mean, they might as well have cancelled. I haven't seen the season 3 of The Witcher 3, but the murmurs, I've been avoiding any commentary out online. But the commentary there is that, is not good. So for all intents and purposes, I won't be bothering to watch season 4, even if I do watch all of season 3 of The Witcher 3. So again, from my standpoint, Netflix is an issue, staying the course in terms of shows, actually having them run for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, well, 6 or 7 or 8 years. I don't think any of the shows that I've paid serious attention to on Netflix have gone that long. Although again, in the case of a direct point of comparison to this, the Marvel shows they did, certainly Jessica Jones and this is my lack of fanaticism, the Daredevil, that's it, the Daredevil show and the Jessica Jones show, I thought were pretty damn good from a storytelling and acting standpoint. The production values were exactly where they needed to be. The MCU shows come off for the most part as cheap in comparison. Hopefully we'll see a turnaround later on in the show. Maybe they'll get some big spectacular stuff in the last couple of episodes. But then again, that's just a case, would then just imply to me that's just a case of Disney cutting corners and not being willing to fund, and create quote unquote appointment television properly, and not being willing to do it properly. And so again, this doesn't come off. I mean, it's so far, second episode in, it's still an awful lot better than season 3 of The Mandalorian, which is a complete and utter mess, which I think is very much a product of kind of the internal infighting and dysfunction within Lucasfilm. And the cast is certainly, more than serviceable here. And the production values seem to be, fine too. It doesn't come across as cheap. It doesn't come across as, like it's some kind of mid-range or low-budget broadcast television show. But it's still, it's still not good enough. And they've been throwing a lot of mediocre stuff at us in terms of the MCU. I didn't bother watching Moon Knight, so I can't comment on that. But the stuff before it, Loki season 1, Miss Marvel, all those other shows, not very good to poor, came across as not very good production value, not very well written. Again, so far this comes across as being, in terms of like the one big event they try to pull off, which action sequence, which was the terror attack, cheapish, to put it mildly. But so far that, the budget hasn't, as far as I'm concerned, hurt it meaningfully anywhere else. But only time will tell. We're only 2 episodes in. It's, again, nowhere near as bad as Book of Boba Fett or the Obi-Wan Kenobi show or season 3 of The Mandalorian, which again says the MCU stuff is at least in better shape. But it's not good enough, and if they want to compete with, if Netflix gets their act together, if they start churning out good quality, high production appointment television shows and actually staying the course of them for a couple of seasons, not cancelling after 1 season or 2 or 3, but going like 5, 6, 7 seasons, then maybe, well, not maybe, Disney will be in serious trouble, because the MCU stuff. The MCU stuff is just it's better than what we were getting out of Star Wars from Lucasfilm, and I haven't watched the Willow show. I hear that's terrible, so I haven't bothered with that. But with kind of Indiana Jones, tanking at the box office and getting kind of pretty negative reviews from kind of quote unquote fans of that IP, Disney really does need to substantially ramp up its quality control. I think they need to cut down the number of shows. They need to spend more money on them. They need to spend more time writing them, or it's going to, again, this isn't bad. It's not like, again, it's not Star Wars bad, which just shows you how bad, the Lucasfilm situation is. But it's not, if I'm watching some sort of detective show that's really about the writing and the dialogue and all the rest, okay. But this isn't a detective show. This is a Marvel Cinematic Universe show. This is supposed to be, an action mass blockbuster television, and it's frankly not at this stage. Now maybe things will improve. A couple of first episodes of the first couple episodes of Andor were dragged a bit, to put it mild, but I still think it's probably the single best thing we've gotten out of Star Wars apart from Rogue One since Disney took over it. Well, that's not necessarily saying much. So there is, again, maybe room for improvement. Well, there is definitely room for improvement, but whether Disney can actually make things better, I don't know. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If for some strange reason you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. And please ring the bell for notifications when I, from time to time, upload content to this channel. This is DafubFilm&TV signing off. Toodaloo.